Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. A man walking under a crimson sky, the sun setting behind the mountains, shadows stretching long upon the earth. He walks alone but not in loneliness, because every step he takes is in the presence of the Almighty. His heartbeat echoes in rhythm with the eternal voice of God. And then, one day, in a way no mortal eye could fully grasp, he vanishes. Not by death, not by decay, but by being taken into heaven, body and soul, into the eternal embrace of the Creator. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live a life so aligned with God that death itself could not touch you? Have you ever asked yourself if it is possible for a human being, in this broken and chaotic world, to walk so closely with the divine that eternity itself bends to receive them? Today, you and I will uncover the untold story of Enoch, the mysterious man who walked with God. And I promise you this, stay with me until the very end, because what you will discover is not just a story from thousands of years ago. It is a revelation that can transform your own walk in life today. But here's something you should know before we continue. Hidden within Enoch's story is a secret, a profound truth about intimacy with God, about living beyond fear, beyond limitation, and even beyond death itself. That secret, that gift, will be revealed to you at the end of this journey. So hold on, because what begins as an ancient story will soon become a mirror into your own soul. Now let us return to the beginning. The book of Genesis, in its quiet, almost understated way, introduces Enoch with only a few words. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him. Just one line, but in that one line lies a world of mystery. What does it mean to walk with God? Why Enoch and not another? And what does it mean that God took him? Picture the ancient world in Enoch's time. The earth was young, but already tainted by human pride and corruption. Generations from Adam had begun to drift far from their Creator. People sought power. They built their own kingdoms. They filled the world with violence. It was a time of shadows, a time where God's voice was distant in most hearts. And yet, among that darkness, one man shined like a living flame. Enoch was not known for building cities or conquering lands. He did not leave behind monuments of stone, but something far greater, a life of communion with the divine. Every morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, he walked, not just with his feet upon the earth, but with his spirit aligned to the eternal steps of God. Can you imagine what those walks must have been like? The silence of dawn, broken only by the whisper of wind through the trees, and in that silence, God's presence. Not as a vague idea, not as a ritual, but as a living, breathing reality. And here's where we pause and ask, could you and I experience something similar today? Could it be that Enoch's story is not merely about an ancient figure, but about the possibility of our own hearts walking daily with the divine? Let me leave that question with you for a moment, because Enoch's life was more than private devotion. It was a testimony. The book of Hebrews tells us, by faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. Faith was the key. Faith so deep, so unwavering, that it rewrote the rules of mortality. Think about that. The natural order says every man must die, but faith says otherwise. Faith opens the door to eternity. Now imagine living in a society where violence, greed, and self-centeredness were the norm. Imagine standing against the tide of culture, choosing instead to walk hand in hand with the unseen God. That was Enoch's reality. He was not simply a man of faith. He was a rebel against the darkness of his age. And God saw him. God delighted in him. And one day, when the time was right, God did something unprecedented. He reached down and took Enoch into his eternal presence. No death, no grave, no farewell. Just a sudden crossing from earth to heaven. Pause for a moment. Let that image sink deep into your heart. A man walking one moment on earth, the next, gone, lifted, embraced by eternity. What does this tell us? That death is not the final word, that intimacy with God is stronger than the grave, and that what Enoch lived can awaken something in us today. But the story doesn't end there, because Enoch's life points forward to mysteries far greater, mysteries that touch on the destiny of all humanity, mysteries that even the New Testament writers connected to the return of Christ and the hope of eternal life. And this is where our journey continues, because, friend, Enoch's untold story is not just about a man, it is about you, about me, about every soul who dares to walk with God in a world that has forgotten him. And at the end of this story, I will reveal the secret of how you, too, can walk in that same intimacy, that same fearless faith, that same victory over death itself. But before we get there, we must dive deeper into the conflict, the revelations, and the echoes of Enoch's life that resound across history. So stay with me, because what comes next will not only open your eyes to the world of Enoch, but also to the unseen path laid before your own steps. The story of Enoch does not end with his sudden disappearance. In fact, that moment was only the beginning of a mystery that would echo across centuries. For generations, people wondered, where did Enoch go? What did he see? Why was he chosen? Some ancient writings, like the Book of Enoch, though not part of the traditional biblical canon, offer a glimpse into the visions and revelations attributed to him. They describe journeys beyond the veil of this world, visions of heaven, encounters with angels, and even glimpses of the final judgment to come. Whether or not every detail is literal, one thing becomes clear. Enoch's life was a bridge between the human and the divine, a sign that God still walked among his people, even in the darkest times. Imagine for a moment being Enoch, taken up into realms beyond the stars, beholding the throne of the Almighty, surrounded by the radiance of angels. Picture the overwhelming awe, the trembling of spirit, and yet the peace that surpasses all understanding. Enoch, a man of flesh and blood like you and me, was granted this privilege because of his faith. And yet, his story was not meant for him alone. His life was a message, a warning, and a promise to all future generations. The book of Jude in the New Testament tells us that Enoch prophesied, "See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone and to convict all the ungodly." Enoch was not silent. He lifted his voice against the corruption of his age, declaring that God's justice would prevail. He warned those who had turned their backs on the Creator, and he proclaimed hope for those who walked in righteousness. Think about the courage this required, to stand in a world drowning in violence, greed, and arrogance, and to declare, "The Lord is coming." Doesn't it sound familiar? Isn't it the same cry that echoes through the prophets, through John the Baptist, through the very lips of Jesus, and through the church today? Here's where Enoch's story becomes not just history, but prophecy. His life was a foreshadowing of something greater, the ultimate victory of God over death and the ultimate union between heaven and earth. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt the weight of this world pressing down on you? The chaos of injustice, the corruption of society, the darkness that seems to swallow hope? Have you ever longed for a sign that God still walks with us, that his promises are still alive? That is why Enoch matters. His life is proof that intimacy with God is not a dream, it is a reality. That walking with God is not for the perfect, but for the faithful, and that those who walk with him will never truly be lost. But let us go deeper. Enoch's disappearance is a mystery, yes, but it is also a pattern. Centuries later, Elijah too would be taken up into heaven without tasting death, swept away in a chariot of fire. And in the New Testament, Paul writes of a day when believers will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, transformed in the twinkling of an eye. Do you see the connection? Enoch's life was the first shadow of a promise that still stretches forward into our future. One man, one faithful walk, became a signpost of what awaits all who trust in God: life beyond death, eternity beyond the grave, a future beyond the limits of this world. Now pause here for a moment and imagine yourself in Enoch's shoes, walking through fields, hearing the laughter of children, watching generations rise and fall. And yet, every day, you choose to walk with God. Not with the crowd, not with the culture, but with the Creator. And then, one day, without warning, your steps on earth become steps in eternity. What would that mean for you? What fears would it erase? What hope would it ignite? And here lies the gift I promised you earlier, a treasure hidden in Enoch's story. The truth that walking with God is not about distance, but about direction. It is not about how far you have traveled, but about who you are walking with. You may stumble, you may falter, but if your heart is set on Him, then you are walking the path of Enoch. This is where the power of his story touches us today. Because in our world, so full of distraction, noise and temptation, the greatest miracle is not being taken up into heaven, but learning to walk with God here and now. In your home, in your work, in your struggles, in your dreams. And yet, the promise of Enoch still shines, that one day death will not have the final word. That those who walk with God will be lifted, transformed, embraced by eternity, just as Enoch was. We are not yet at the end of this story. There is still more to uncover, the final revelation, the ultimate lesson, the secret of why Enoch's life matters for us today. But before we reach that conclusion, let me leave you with this thought. Enoch's life was not just about escape, it was about testimony. He lived in such a way that his very existence proclaimed the reality of God. And that, my friend, is a calling that echoes into your life right now. Stay with me for the final part, because there we will uncover the hidden key, the profound revelation that can change the way you walk, the way you live, and even the way you see death itself. The story is not finished. The best is yet to come. And now we come to the heart of the story, the moment where Enoch's life speaks not just as history, but as revelation for you and me today. We have seen him walk in intimacy with God. We have seen him taken, body and soul, into the eternal embrace of the Creator. We have seen his life shine as a prophecy of hope for generations to come. But what is the lesson for us? What is the treasure hidden in this story? The secret of Enoch's life is this: walking with God is not about reaching perfection, it is about walking in direction. Enoch was not remembered for being flawless. He was remembered for his faith, for choosing every single day to align his steps with the steps of God. And here is the revelation: the same God who walked with Enoch walks with you right now, in your doubts, in your struggles, in your hidden battles, in your dreams. You may feel small, unseen, or even broken, but if you choose to walk with him, eternity is already unfolding beneath your feet. Think about this. Enoch's story ends with a mystery. He was no more, for God took him. But your story is still being written. Every choice you make, every prayer you whisper, every step of faith you take is another line in that eternal book. You are not just walking through time, you are walking into eternity. And here is where Enoch's reward becomes your invitation. For Enoch, walking with God led to victory over death itself. For you, walking with God means that fear loses its grip, hope becomes your companion, and eternity begins now, not after death, not someday far away, but in every breath, every moment, every step. Let me ask you a question. If you knew that your walk with God today could echo into eternity, how would you walk? Would you walk distracted, hurried, consumed by the noise of this world? Or would you slow down, lift your eyes, and choose to walk in step with the one who holds eternity in his hands? This is the gift Enoch's life leaves us, The revelation that death is not the end, that intimacy with God is possible, and that a life of faith can transform not only your destiny, but the destiny of generations after you. And perhaps this is why the writer of Hebrews tells us, without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Faith is the path, faith is the walk, faith is the key that opens heaven's door. Friend, here is the truth you've been waiting for. If you walk with God, you will never walk alone. And one day, when your steps on earth come to an end, you will find yourself not in darkness, but in the light of his presence, just as Enoch did. So let this story transform you. Let it challenge you. Let it invite you to live differently, not chasing what fades, but walking with the eternal. And before we close, I want to leave you with a choice. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, will you walk alone? Or will you walk with God? The choice is yours, and eternity waits on the other side of that choice. Now, as we conclude, let me give you the final reward I promised. The deep truth hidden in Enoch's untold story is this: your intimacy with God can rewrite your ending. Death does not have the last word. Fear does not define your journey. If you walk with him, eternity begins now. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you reflect on your own walk, I invite you to take a step today. Share this message with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment with your thoughts, your prayers, or your own journey of faith. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, so you can join me for the next story, where we will dive even deeper into the mysteries of the Word of God. Stories that will not only inspire you, but transform you. Because Enoch's story is only one piece of a greater tapestry, one thread in the eternal fabric of God's plan. And just as Enoch walked with God, so can you. So walk boldly, walk faithfully. And one day may it be said of you what was said of him. He walked with God, and then he was no more, for God took him.